We are taping this one on the lands of the Ainu people, in which was known as a little fishing village called Edo during the Tokugawa shogunate. And then during the don't interrupt me in my opening.
Just trying to help you out.
But during the Meiji Restoration, it's Meiji.
Just trying to help you out.
Meiji, piss off.
It's how respectfully you do.
Unbelievable.
I think you need to start again, mate. You've
start again.
This morning I visited the Governor-General and Her Excellency has accepted my advice that an election be held on Saturday, 3rd of May 2025. Today, the prayers of more than 1 billion people go with Pope Francis to his rest.
Breaking news here at home now on the election. Peter Dutton has now joined the Prime Minister in suspending campaigning for today.
I'm not willing to say this is climate change happening right now. Well, I don't know, David, because I'm not a scientist.
Yes! With Prime Minister! Number 10,
Election Countdown 2025.
The presenting sponsor for Socially Democratic is Dunn Street. Dunn Street is a campaign agency that specialises in community organising. We only work with people who want to build power to make the world a better place. And if you want to create change in 2025, then hit us up at dunstreet.com.au. A special shout out to all of our Patreon members as well. And you can join our community for free or for as little as $1.50 a month. And you too can help support this podcast. All paid members receive a welcome gift. So if you have recently signed up, please check your inbox for a message from our producer asking for your shipping address, because without that, then we can't send you your merch. And finally, today's episode is brought to you by Maurice Blackburn Lawyers. Maurice Blackburn has been fighting for workers' rights in Australia for more than 100 years. They believe the law should serve everyone and not just those that can afford it. So for empathetic and expert legal support, call Maurice Blackburn Lawyers today. All right, let's get on with today's episode. We're taping this one on a Wednesday morning on the lands of the Ainu people in what was known as a little fishing village called Edo during the reign of the Tokugawa shogunate. And then during the Meiji Restoration, the emperor moved the capital from Kyoto to Edo and renamed the city Tokyo, which literally means Eastern Capital. And then they made the world cool. And that's what we're going to be. We're going to be cool. So for our fourth episode of our weekly federal election countdown series, we are well underway. Voting is underway. E-Day is a mere 10 days away. And since we last recorded, we've had two leaders' debates. The Prime Minister suspended his campaign out of respect for the passing of the late Holy Father, Pope Francis. Peter Dutton suspended his campaign out of respect for all the professional campaigners around the world because it's been so bad. And we've had an Easter break where Dutton and the coalition hoped to breathe new life into their flailing campaign, but had trouble just simply rolling the stone away. And to help me unpack the week that was on the campaign trail, I'm joined by two Labor campaign experts. He is the former campaign director for Victorian Labor, former National Assistant Secretary, Victorian Senator, member for Batman, and a man that respects Japanese quality leisure wear. David Feeney, welcome back to Socially Democratic.
Konnichiwa.
And she's the former Deputy Chief of Staff to three-time winning Premier Daniel Andrews and now a managing partner at FMRS Advisory, and sharing a tatami mat with me in this moment, Jessie McCrone. Welcome.
Konnichiwa, Stephen Des.
Welcome back to Socially Democratic. And we'll be joined by former Digital Director for Dan Andrews and for Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern, and now heads up his own digital campaign consultancy, Good to Go. Reid Fleming will be on the show later on to discuss social media, strategy and tactics in this particular campaign. Okay, we're in the final fortnight of the campaign. As I said before, early voting is now underway. So basically every day is election day, with the news poll showing it's a 50-48 lead to Labor on a 2PP basis. The coalition is facing a compressed timeline to reset this narrative. Almost 40% of voters opted to vote early at the last federal election. meaning from here on in, every quiet day is a lost day. And my first question to you, Jessie, is with the passing of the Holy Father and the halting of campaign activity, certainly that occurred yesterday, Monday, which party has more to lose from this pause in campaigning?
I think I'm going to sound a bit like a broken record here, Stephen, but I genuinely think it's the Liberals that have needed a step change this whole campaign to shift the momentum in their direction. Labor has been playing the game from in front and playing defensive in some ways in how they've approached their announcements and how they've approached their campaign. So really it is the Liberal Party that is going to be a bit further put back by this pause. I would just say that they are starting a bit of a briefing game, the Liberals, trying to defend their campaign strategy. And they're sort of suggesting now that they've been saving their money to go very big, very negative late, the last 2 weeks. As you've pointed out, voting has started. I do wonder if it's a little bit too little, too late, but we'll see, I guess.
David, do you think Dutton can afford any more pauses in the campaign at this stage with voting now beginning?
No. I mean, as Jessie said, the pause suits Labor because Labor is ahead and Labor seems to be slowly but inexorably building up some momentum as well. I mean, Jessie's right, Labor's playing defensively, but it's not looking that defensive because Albo's confidence and the Labor Party's confidence is growing, and so they are looking and sounding like they're on the front foot. And the pause just couldn't have been more poorly timed. Of course, during Easter, a lot of people away, a lot of people not at work, a lot of people focusing on family. So that was something of a dip in campaign engagement anyways. And then the death of the Pope and the stalling of campaigning around that to mark that occasion was just another gift for Labor, really.
I would also just like to add on that point that it pays to be lucky in politics. And those of you that are in the Labor Party will realise that congratulations go out to the National Secretary on the birth of his child with Dimity Paul. And that happened the Thursday before the long weekend. And if you are the National Secretary running a national campaign, I don't think, and you're going to have a child during the election campaign, I don't think they could have picked a better time for that to happen. So congratulations, Dimity Paul.
Indeed. Let's jump to actually, just before we do, I mean, some of the points you've raised there, David, about particularly over the Easter weekend, I'm going to be interested in hearing from Reid Fleming when he comes on later on the show, because obviously digital can fill that gap so somewhat if folks are not watching television because they're on holiday somewhere, or if they're not reading traditional media, they're certainly on their phones. And I'd be interested I wonder what Reid's thoughts are on in terms of money spent and targeted messaging in the social media platforms during. I mean,
I can certainly talk about the digital campaign in the seat of Forest, for instance, because I was in Western Australia where there's a Liberal Teals contest, and I suddenly started getting all of that digital campaign on my phone. So I wonder, and I'll be interested in hearing from Reid too, whether people start to get, different feeds because they're in different places.
Yeah. We're getting a lot of ads for Toyota and Mitsubishi's right now in Tokyo, and nothing from Labor or the Liberal Party campaign, which is surprising. The second leaders debate, a few pivotal moments emerged. Dutton, I don't know. Climate change and extreme weather is being replayed everywhere, and Labor's ad team couldn't have written a better script for that in terms of his response to the question about whether it's man-made. On foreign policy, Dutton's hesitation and Albanese's confidence in dealing with both Trump and Xi drew a stark contrast, although both sides probably have vulnerabilities on China. Dutton's Trump comment suggests that he's trying to peel away from MAGA even more, but is it too late? Jessie, just want to go to you first of all. How much damage did Dutton do with his climate comments?
It depends on, obviously that's a message that is built for particular seats. I imagine it's something that, it's always challenging, for instance, in the Victorian seats where that would be pivotal. There's always this game in McNamara and probably Wills as well of not trying to run down the Liberal vote too much, and trying to keep that three-way contest. But there are places where that will be played a lot. I suspect in some of the Teal seats that will be a key message for them. I think in Victoria in general that won't be a popular thing to have said. But to your point about foreign policy, I think that in the Spears debate, Albanese was very, very, very good on this front. In the last federal campaign, foreign policy played a much bigger role than I think anyone expected. I don't think that it's going to play, if you ignore sort of the Trump element and just talk about sort of our local area and the impact that had last time, I don't think it's going to have the same impact. But I think it shows that Labor is far more confident talking about foreign policy now after the last campaign than we have been previously. We are far more comfortable in the space. In my view, and David may have a different one, it has been a space the Liberals have tended to look more confident. But I think that after the last campaign, that has really flipped. Noting that Rudd had his own sort of foreign policy capacity to talk about that in 2007.
David, your thoughts on the foreign policy conversations that was had with the ABC debate? Is there a particular winner in this?
Yeah, there was. I thought, to go back once just a little bit, I thought Dutton's failure to grip up climate change was a bigger mistake than Jessie suggests, because what are they doing in the Teal front? I mean, they've got this Teal insurgency. You'll remember I've previously suggested that the Teal insurgency might have been a one-off, because in the absence of Morrison, in the absence of a sense that women were being so poorly treated in Parliament, an absence that the government was ignoring climate change, the bubble might burst and people would go back to their voting patterns. Well, that seems to be wrong. And the Teal insurgency seems to be alive and well. And while all of these battles like Kooyong and Goldstein and Curtin in West Australia are close, the Teals are clearly in the hunt. And so he's got this Teal insurgency, which is diabolical for him, of course, because if it turns into a long-standing political phenomena, it almost stands as a roadblock to the Liberals ever getting a majority in the House of Representatives. And so by equivocating over climate change, he was weakening that flank. He needed to come up with a formula. He needed to come up with a set of words which guarded that flank. He didn't. In terms of foreign policy, I don't agree with Jessie. I think this is a campaign where foreign policy has been unusually prominent. And I think it's been unusually prominent because of Trump and tariffs.
I excluded Trump from the answer on foreign policy.
I don't know how you exclude Donald Trump from a consideration of Australian foreign affairs.
I just feel like it's, no, that's fair. I was more talking about our region,
okay.
But I take your point.
Yeah. And sort of in the weeks leading up to this election, we saw Donald Trump go straight from his golden age to his dark age, where he suddenly became a global drag on Conservative votes. And so now the Liberal Party here in Australia are so desperate to not look Trumpy, because Trump is so unpopular with Australian voters, that they've backed off talking about immigration, and they've backed off talking about foreign affairs. And so in this debate, we had Dutton, who asserted on the one hand that he would have got a better tariff deal out of Donald Trump, and on the other hand said, well, I've never met him. But Anthony's met him, Prime Minister Albo's met him, I've never met him. And then when asked about Z, well, I've never met him, but Albo's met him. I mean, on both occasions, Dutton volunteered the fact that he'd never met them and that his adversary had. I thought that was odd, and obviously brings into sharp relief the fact that the Liberal Party are walking this absurd line where they will do better out of a Trump administration because they're ideological fellow travellers, but they're not ideological fellow travellers and they've never met him.
Well, I think specifically they said our ambassador used to play golf with him was quite explicitly what they said was how we'll get a better deal.
Yeah, whereas Albo has carefully selected the ambassador for the United States who can't talk to the president. So we're insulated from that criticism.
Touche. Very good. Let's talk about policy contrast from week 4. Labor announcements. A women's safety policy focused mostly on economic abuse protections and has landed very well with key demographics and advocacy groups in that space. No major fiscal shifts, but they're leaning into this contrast message of he cuts, you pay. Labor Party loves a cuts ad when we're targeting a negative against the Tories.
Our creative team certainly do.
Yeah, absolutely. Dutton's targeting Dutton's nuclear proposal with sort of scary cost blowouts. Meanwhile, on the coalition side, they've dropped a $750 million crime package and a small business support plan, including reinstatement of the ABCC and a 2-year regulation freeze. And Dutton continues touring marginal electorates like a man who knows this is his only shot in the locker. David, coalition targeting small business and community safety. Is this their new strategy to win back the votes in the suburbs?
Well, I think all of the coalition's policy pronouncements, including those, suffer for the fact that they've come out too late, they're quite complex, and they're not being digested. So I think there's a parity of confusions around energy policy, and who you think has got a better plan is now almost a matter of faith. If you listen to the debate, there's so much jargon, there's so many acronyms, petajoules versus megawatts at 10 paces, that I wonder whether voters can actually distill the difference. All they're focused in, of course, is how much it's keeping the lights on and keeping them affordable. That's true, I think, of just about every field of human endeavour. In housing policy, for instance, which Dutton spent 3 days talking about housing policy. And again, it's what one economist called a bin fire of bad ideas. Both sides came out with various aspects to housing policy. And I think it was a parody of confusion. Today, the coalition has come out with a major defence statement, which I think is probably their last major policy announcement of the campaign. And again, the question arises, why so late? And how could it be that the coalition launches a policy like this without an explanation about how they're going to pay for it? So the Liberal Party really have left behind the idea that they are a more fiscally conservative and prudent economic player. And you can see this in some of the research now, which, who do you trust to better deliver you lower taxes? Labor is winning that measure, which is incredible. And Labor is winning that measure because it started this campaign with a tax cut, small, but with a tax cut, which the Liberal Party opposed. And then the Liberal Party has never since come up with a reasonable explanation for how its spending in this campaign is going to be paid for. And that's the challenge it has again today. We see after their defence announcement, well, what cuts are you going to make to support this? Not telling. How does your budget add up? Well, like oppositions always do, we'll produce our figures at the end of the campaign. Well, the great redoubt of the Liberal Party is its economic credentials, and they are just another casualty to this ham-fisted Liberal Party campaign, which I think is just, the repercussions after this election will be delightful to watch.
I think it's interesting in terms of how they've organised the cadence of their campaign. So they've been talking about law and order and arguably state issues for quite a while, certainly since certainly wrapping it into the anti-Semitism October 7 debate has been this sort of at the forefront, this safety message and that you're not safe under Labor. It's something they've been running in Queensland quite heavily. It's something they've run in Victoria. I assume that they've run a fair bit of it in New South Wales, although I think that Premier Minns's positioning on that has made it a little bit harder for Dutton. But if that is a key tenet of their argument that Albanese is a weak Prime Minister, he's weak, which is a word that Dutton used a lot more in the Spears debate than he did in the People's Forum on Sky. why wasn't there some policy ballast underneath that argument earlier? I feel like they've had these different threads that they've wanted to pull, one of them being safety, one of them being energy, and not really the economy, as David has just said, but they haven't sort of structured their campaign in such a way that they've added ballast to their rhetoric early enough to really be able to, one, give people on the ground something to campaign on, and two, to sort of sound fair income. So like the closest you would say in the cost of living stuff, they've had the fuel excise, and they've had they have one other thing as well, which I've forgotten, which suggests how well they're communicating it. But I think David's right. It was a massive tactical error to vote against the tax break at the budget. I think that Labor, and I think I said this at the time, did a phenomenal job of the tactics of that week, and when they announced the election and putting the tax vote on so quickly. I thought that was very exceptionally well done. But the Liberal Party they've sort of got these threads, this sort of outline, this vague of a campaign without clear blocks. Whereas you look at Labor, even this week, they've been speaking quite directly to women voters. They've done this announcement around economic security and coercion, which I think will be very popular in particular seats. I think that they've pushed the work from home thing very well, but it hasn't felt like they've got all this rhetoric and they've just slammed a policy on it. They've often talked about the rhetoric, but had the policy ballast that sits underneath it. I think just in the way the campaigns both are constructed, it feels like Labor looked at the finish line and worked their campaign strategy backwards, exactly. Whereas the Liberals seem to be building the plane as they're flying it.
There's probably a shadow minister somewhere in the coalition who's busy working on their policy right now.
Yeah.
Something that should have done 2 years ago.
Absolutely.
Looking at the Liberal Party over the last 6 months, it reminds me of like a basketball team or an NBA team that has gone through the regular season and looked good, beating up on all of the average teams. And then they get to the finals and it's the pressure and the strategy that you thought they were taking into the finals was going to give them success. It's just completely unraveled. And you're looking at it going, where was the Liberal Party of the regular season? Because this is falling apart. And it's not getting worse each week, but it's not getting better.
But if you look at the poll, basically from May of last year, Labor's position slowly but inexorably started to decay. And by January of this year, it looked like Labor was in real trouble with its primary vote in the 20s. And over that period, as we've discussed several times, all of those external events happening to Australia and to the Australian government played well for the coalition. And the coalition and Dutton showed himself to be really good at diagnosing grievance and speaking to grievance.
Spot on.
But then the starter's gun goes off, and as we've just said, Labor has a well-prepared plan integrated between Parliament, policy and campaign, and speeds off in its campaign Porsche. And Dutton opens up the garage, and it turns out there's nothing there but a jalopy because they haven't done the policy work. There is no integration between their Parliament, their campaign, and their policy teams. And voters are now forced to make a choice between Albo and Dutton rather than Albo and the perfect. And in that contest, the Liberal Party have slowly fallen into a heap. And now their primary vote is neck and neck with Labor's. The Teal insurgency is not receding. And I think they've gone from every prospect of having a terrific election to a disastrous one, where they don't win in the outer suburbs and they don't win in the inner city. And the Liberal Party is staring at a future where it cannot form a majority government in this country.
I think that is an accurate assessment. I also think that after the campaign, if it plays out the way that David is saying, there will be a lot of blame pushed at Trump. Sort of changed this whole election. Everything was going fine for us and Trump turned up. I'm not seeing any signs from the Liberal Party that without Trump, they would have run a better campaign. He has been a feature of it, but he has not forced them, for instance, not to have a safety announcement to back up their rhetoric months ago.
I wonder if he scared them off immigration.
Yeah, possibly.
And I wonder if he scared them off a Doge-type cuts and efficiency drive, scared them off taking on the task of making their budget add up. That's obviously just speculation on my part.
Before Trump, Dutton had done that interview on Insiders where he essentially just said, I'm not telling you the cuts we're making till after government is formed, essentially, which was a startling thing to do. Lara Tingle was the only one that seemed to be offended by the very concept that they wouldn't tell anyone if things had added up until after the election. So to some extent, it does feel like they kind of said, we're not going to bother with that because everyone's going to trust us more on the economy and debt than the Labor Party, and we don't have to. On immigration, I think I've said this before, I think there was a space for them to make an immigration argument without sounding like Trump. They have clearly been too scared to try. That is a phenomenal outcome for the Labor Party, and possibly, you're right, David, has heavily changed the way they're going to campaign. They've campaigned.
The other thing is that I've reflected on as well is that, and I think this is a good thing for folks like us that are campaigners, that, you know, demographics isn't destiny. What this has shown is that you still have to make an argument. You still have to campaign or not make an argument in the case of the coalition campaign. It's not just a case of, here are the demographics in electorates and this will be the outcome in 6 months' time. We have seen a shift, and so credit to, if in the end that Labor does get a result here, there is credit to the whole campaign for being, because obviously the vote was soft.
I think it still is.
Yeah, you know, and I don't think I don't think we have our foot on their neck, but I do think we keep going harder. Like I kind of was like, the Easter break, I kind of like to keep on pushing this. Like I think we can go deeper and deeper and deeper into.
We've fought our way out of the corner and into the centre of the room.
Yeah.
I think we can say that
you
much.
know.
Yeah.
So let's keep going.
Like if the momentum keeps pushing the way it is, I think it just shows campaign effect is a thing. And just giving up and saying this election is lost or any of those things, like, and I know we're campaigners, so we would say this, but there is a bit of, I think particularly from the federal party sometimes, and they have shown this in this case that they're prepared to fight, there is just a little bit of demographics is destiny, or we've won or we've lost. I think this campaign just shows if you put your shoulder to the wheel and you have a campaign strategy and you stick to it, you can win.
Yeah.
If demographics was destiny, Trump would never have been president of the United States.
No.
I mean, he broke the Democrat hold on Hispanics and to some extent Black Americans. I remember a time when Democrats used to look at the demographics of their country and say that a Republican majority was soon going to be statistically impossible. Obviously, that's not how the story ends.
No. So with both campaigns now leaning hard into negative territory, and the coalition has fired up a fresh round of high-frequency ads under the banner, we can't afford 3 more years of Labor. Early voting is now underway, and the campaign essentially on pause for the Easter break and Anzac Day and the passing of Pope Francis. I'm just interested about how this is all playing out, and to help us unpack that, we're joined by Reid Fleming, who's a digital campaigning expert, worked for Daniel Andrews, Jacinda Ardern, was basically one of the reasons why Nick Rees is now the Mayor of Melbourne. And he's going to talk to us about digital through his own expert lens. So, Reid, let's start here. We've just had 3 days where campaigning has basically stopped. We talked about it a little bit earlier in the program. What does an extended silence like that do to digital momentum? Are either side actually capitalising on this gap online?
Konnichiwa, firstly. Good to see you guys. I mean, it's weird, isn't it, having a bit of an interregnum in the middle of a campaign. I was trying to remember previous times where this has happened in campaigns that I've been on, and all that kind of came to mind was COVID and natural disasters. And what happens is that for most of the teams in campaign headquarters, they have a bit of a breather. But the digital team, no such luxury. It just rolls on. Jessie's laughing because she has been the one cracking the whip with the digital team when the rest of the campaign is
midnight. Where do you all think you're going? The internet is still on.
Yeah, you're right. The internet's on. The media team, they're not doing anything if the leader's off the road. But
well, technically the media team never does anything anyway. But
I'm losing friends now. So looking at the we can look at the organic and the paid sides of the campaign, and it does look like there was a little bit of a pulling back over the Easter period. We can see so far the data for paid for Good Friday. And interestingly, on Meta, it looks like, so that's Facebook and Instagram platforms, it looks like Labor and the Liberals had a bit of a Good Friday agreement and a truce where they paused their advertising. No such agreement on YouTube, where they just steamrolled right on through. And I don't know what's sacrosanct about Meta, but there was a little bit of a pause there. And they've done the same on the organic side. Both these parties they're running a kind of a volume strategy where they're posting a shitload of content and seeing what sticks. So kind of on the day before Good Friday, on Good Thursday, Labor posted 20 things organic on Instagram, but pulled that back just to 5 on Good Friday, and then the same on Easter Monday, where they only posted twice. Liberals, they did the same. They only posted twice on Good Friday, but they stuck to the 2 kind of holy scripts for the Liberals, Happy Easter and saying we'll cut taxes. So a little bit of a break. Does it have a big impact? On the paid side, where we see they've pulled back on Meta, they lose a day of advertising, but we've seen them, ramp it up again pretty massively in the days since. For organic, it probably doesn't have much of an impact. Particularly on vertical video formats, we see the momentum of your top performing posts continue to roll for a week, 2, sometimes even longer. And so those kinds of, their best posts that they would have been getting out this time last week, they still would have been circulating in group chats and on the Discover feed on Instagram, regardless of Good Friday. I think Jessie pointed out last week on the podcast that over that long weekend, people are spending more time on their phone, and certainly that looks like that's the case in terms of the weekend just gone. People hiding in bedrooms, avoiding their family, and so they would have been consuming a whole lot of that older organic content. So does it have a big impact? Probably not a huge amount. Something I did find interesting, digging through the data here, is it doesn't look like the Liberal Party digital team was being paid their penalty rates because they did not post a single ad over the weekend. So they didn't have a Jessie in their office keeping them going through the break.
Sounds like they might have been working from home. Reid, I wonder what you can tell us about the minor parties. It seems to me from my research on YouTube, the Trumpet of Patriots is spending a poultice of money. And I was watching the debate last night on Channel 9, I think it was, and every ad break was just a painful explosion of television ads, but including long-form 60-second ads, it seems, from the Trumpet of Patriots, where their spokeswoman was speed reading across 20 different policy areas. Do you think these efforts from the Trumpet of Patriots or the Greens feature in the spend, and what sort of impact do you think they might be having?
Yeah, so the Trumpet of Patriots certainly are making a big impact. They have spent on YouTube alone, they've spent more than Labor and the Liberals combined.
Wow.
It looks like they are going early and probably just going to maintain a fairly steady spend. I'm just guessing if they're going early, it would be hard to believe that they have deeper pockets. But Labor and the Liberals are definitely opening up their spend now. We're going to see their spending probably based on the how the spend looked in 2022. It will double this week and it will double again next week.
Wow.
And we'll reach, I was trying to find a kind of a comparison to, quantify just how big the spend is. And it literally will be about the GDP of a small island nation. there will be about $60 million spent across YouTube and Meta in this campaign. And
I didn't realise New Zealand's GDP was that high.
Tuvalu, Jessie, has a GDP of 62 million. So it's massive, and the Trumpeter Patriots are certainly contributing to that, and certainly making a big spend on YouTube. Yeah, but Labor and the Liberals, who spend based on the numbers in 2022, will ramp up. Yeah, big time this week and next. And so if you think you're already seeing a lot, strap in.
Can we compare Labor and Liberal, Reid? Just break that down in terms of quantum, like the amount of money those two parties are spending in the digital space?
Yeah, for sure. Liberals have gone out a little bit earlier on Meta. These figures are spread out over a whole bunch of pages. It looks like most of the Liberals' spend is going through individual candidates rather than through their central page. They're spending a lot through their central page, but the opposite is true for Labor. So the Liberals have spent about 1.5 million so far on Meta, versus Labor's about $1 million. But in the last few days, Labor has really opened up the taps on Meta. The opposite is true on YouTube, where Labor spent about 2.6 million and the Liberals about 1.1. So it's shaking out, a little more evenly. But I would expect that the way that it looks like Labor is putting their spend towards the early vote period, which should certainly be a pretty standard way to organise your pacing. I would expect that they will outspend the Liberals.
What are we seeing in terms of the balance between their paid content and their organic content?
They're following a similar kind of organic strategy. They're trying lots of stuff and seeing what sticks. And there are some people who are critical of that approach, but it's the TikTok effect really of the organic platforms, where you can afford to post lots and lots of content and just see what connects with people. And, it might only be 1 in 10 or 1 in 100 that does break through. But when it does, you have the potential to reach 1, 2 more million people for free with something which, has some kind of emotional connection. It makes you laugh, it makes you angry, whatever. And that's where you'll be having a persuasive effect.
Yeah, it's always challenging though, like when you see a piece is starting to go viral, for want of a better word, and you're like, I really hope this is going for the right reasons. Like there is a challenge with the organic stuff where you send it out there. Reid, you would feel the anxiety of this way more than I will. The numbers start climbing. You're like, I really hope people aren't sharing this for the wrong reasons.
Yeah. You want to see a good balance between likes, comments, and shares. You don't want to just see shares. That's a bad sign. And there's been a wee bit of that. There have been some minor party candidates who have been leaning into dances and interesting strategies where you see the number of times that's been shared into group chats, which is a cruel feature of the Instagram interface.
That's not reasonable. They shouldn't put that there.
And when you see thousands and thousands of sends into group chats, that's cruel.
Do we get any sense at this stage of, well, and I think particularly, well, actually in an offensive sense for Labor, money being targeted into particular seats that may not have been in play, 2-3 weeks ago? And I'm thinking Menzies in Victoria, in the eastern suburbs of Melbourne, and maybe Sturt, although it is a target seat for the South Australian campaign. But a feeling of, okay, things are going well, because this is one area where you can nimbly redirect resources. So are we seeing that from an offensive standpoint from Labor, or maybe a defensive standpoint from the Liberals? Like, is Dutton's seat all of a sudden getting a lot of financial love when it comes to their digital spend?
Yeah, so in the ad libraries, there's publicly available data on this, and it does look like Labor is following mostly a defensive strategy. Lining it up to the pendulum, where Labor's placing ads is mostly on the red side of that. Gilmore, Lyons, Robertson, even Monaro, all the way through to Macquarie. But they are making a play for some pickups too. If you're to believe the ad placements, sometimes they are just ambit spends to scare people, and certainly the spend in Dixon might be along those lines. But yes, there's money going into Sturt and Bass, Bonner, Leichhardt. Here in Victoria, it looks like the spend is a little more defensive and mostly going into held seats.
I do like that this is the modern version of letterboxing your opponent's street. It's just one of those lovely negatives you put into all of their neighbours' letterboxes, but not theirs. And suddenly candidates start losing their mind about the sophistication of the campaign on the other side. Not that I've ever done that.
No.
And the other thing I wanted to ask you, Reid, was do you think Dutton's team has refined the playbook for younger voters in this online space?
Yeah, so they, on the organic side, reaching younger voters through Instagram and TikTok, I think they're missing their mark. They started this with a pretty fundamental messaging challenge. They're in opposition. They need this to be a change election, and they have to go negative. But at the same time, they've got an ex-cop leader who has this kind of Darth Vader-esque public image. And clearly it's been their long-term media strategy to try and soften that. They've been explicit about that. The trouble is that they've hit the campaign, and now online they're trying to do both. And you just can't. Their channels kind of swing wildly from these kind of nasty, impersonal, and sometimes bizarre negatives on Elbow and the Teals. And then the next post is this video of Dutton watching an iPad of his son speaking to him, or Howard speaking to him, which besides a bit weird. But for the audience, it's whiplash. You're going from kind of mean and nasty to no, our guy's a nice guy. When you've got goodwill behind your campaign and momentum and energy, you can get away with that. Your audience is willing to go with you on that. But for the Liberals, I just don't think this is that election, and I don't think Dutton is the guy that can pull that off.
No, and I reflected on that point a bit, like watching the NRL show that the Prime Minister went on, and the content that they've shared with their followers and that is being shared by a lot of people. And I thought Albanese looked good doing the hand passes into the target. Like, that was certainly not a strategy that I was ever going to advocate for Daniel Andrews doing any sort of ball sports. Unless it was golf, and even then. But
definitely not advocating that.
I did think, like, in terms of likability, this is not a bad strategy for Albanese. When it comes to Dutton, I think this is a criticism I have of him generally, and I would love to see the research. They did explicitly say they were trying to soften him. I am interested in how much it was holding people back from being open to him, because I think one of his greatest strengths was a bit of the, you may not like what I say, but, you're going to believe I'm going to do it. He has this sort of competent, directive vibe, and whether they were just going to lean into that and do the very sharp contrast where Albanese's government has been far more collectivist, and Albanese has allowed his ministers to step up, and Dutton sort of had this far more controlled. And if he was trying to say Albo was weak, that is the contrast message. So I am interested in that strategy, not just from a digital perspective. I have found that, I said this when they did the work from home backflip, it really undersells his actual authentic self. And I don't know that it was the right way forward.
Yeah,
I totally agree. I to use a phrase that we might remember, let Dutton be Dutton. I mean, the character had certain brand strengths, just lean into them and let them rip. Australians don't. He's chasing likability, and he never needed likability.
No.
He just needed respect. And
I kind of reject the premise that voters in Australia are looking for someone that they like to lead them anyway. I think you certainly don't want the voters to hate him. Like, I'm not suggesting you go the other way.
Scott Morrison has run that experiment.
And to that end, they brought on the team, the digital team, the Kiwi digital team that was behind Scott Morrison and behind Boris Johnson and behind Christopher Luxon. And to soften the guy. But Dutton isn't one of them. They are somewhere between, clowns and kind of nice, likable guys, and Dutton's not.
No,
and he's kind of missing from their page as well. The only content we actually see of him on the page are in these weirdly filmed, sit-down, dimly lit kind of Days of Your Lives style set videos where he's watching videos of other people speaking to him because they can't possibly put him in the same room as these people. It's agonizing to watch. And so if the planned stuff is that bad, I'd hate to see the unplanned stuff because they're not even posting it. It must be diabolical.
Jessie, do you think that Dutton should have dressed as Voldemort throughout the entire campaign?
I think there would have been a millennial vote in it. I think that there was a whole coast of content they could have done around Horcruxes and other things that, Stephen, you certainly wouldn't have understood, but it would have got shared in group chats, that's for sure.
Well, I don't want to push the Trump button, but I have been thinking about what would a let Dutton be Dutton digital organic strategy look like. And I think the digital strategy would be pretty similar to Trump's. When there was a lot of attention suddenly on him in the campaign, he would be able to get away with, kind of long, tedious text posts and that people are going to read because you're in the middle of a campaign, and letting him go negative without necessarily the need to have him doing trends and stunts and so on, which is the bread and butter of the campaign operators behind him, which they're not doing, either because they know that it's not going to land with Dutton, or because he's not giving them the time to do it.
I'm interested just to ask here about the podcast strategy from both campaigns, because one element of that is the amount of content that's shared. It's not only the actual downloads of the podcast that you're looking for. You're looking for a partnership with someone with a huge following like Abby Chatsford and your content going to them in bite-sized 10-second bits. Do you have reflections on the podcast strategy from either campaign?
I think, it's totally legitimate. You're using the influencers getting what they want out of it because they need content, and it's credentialing them, and it's getting some of them into the budget lockup, and that makes them able to pump their tires up and say we're important. And on the other side of the equation, you get to reach these people who are probably completely disengaged with politics in a total softball interview. It's a win-win.
I'm interested in the actual podcast they've selected, and I might be going to get to a particular point here. Like I do think that some
the
of
rest
the ones,
is politics,
the Labor
was a good one.
Well, I do wonder about that. I think I understand the point of the podcast is reaching a particular audience, and to some extent you can manage your message to that group depending on what they care about. Like that's one of the beauties of the way that we campaign now. I don't understand who the Prime Minister was trying to convince by going on The Rest is Politics. I think that is a podcast that you should definitely pencil in if things go well for just after the campaign. I am interested in everyone else's view about whether that was
we know The Rest is Politics has a very big Australian audience. Australians are the second largest group of listeners for that particular podcast, which is why the two of them pay a bit of attention to Australia in their work and in their mutterings. And in terms of it being 1 or 2 hours in Albo's day, he was speaking to sort of a centre-left audience. Not bad work guarding the green flank. It was a good interview. He was very comfortable and relaxed. He got to roll out the log cabin story again in a manner that was natural.
I heard he did a good job of the log cabin story.
And he did. Yeah. But also it's about breaking into the ecosystem, because all of these pods talk and reinforce one another. That's certainly the US experience, I would say. Like you get into, Joe Rogan bounces off the other one that bounces off the other one, and they all report each other's major moments. Now, this ecosystem is still very young in Australia, but I think getting the Prime Minister in there on the ground floor and experimenting with it is excellent.
But Reid, when David said the word log cabin story, you and I both winced. Why did you wince?
Look, I have to completely disagree with you, David. Of all the podcasts that Anthony Albanese has been on, The Rest is Politics is the one that I am subscribed to. And that reflects the audience. It's tragics and sickos like us who are subscribed to podcasts like that and to this one. And they're exactly the kind of people that you shouldn't be spending 2 hours of the Prime Minister's time in the middle of an election campaign where he could have been just talking to undecided voters.
My other reflection, having not heard it, someone has reflected to me, he may have sounded a little bit like it was in the bag already, which I worry a little bit about. I don't think the campaign is behaving in that way, but I wonder about that, having not heard it myself. I am for victorious people going on podcasts like this one, Stephen, and reflecting on the campaign and sort of particularly speaking to this cohort of people or supporters. I think that is good. I do wonder, like the fact that this is what I consider something to critique about the federal Labor campaign suggests it's going very well because I'm like, this 2-hour podcast, should you have? Like, it's not really the do or die of the campaign. I do wonder whether it was time better spent on a different podcast.
Reid and I will just have to agree to disagree. I think it was, and I think guarding your flank with respect to sort of centre-left, teal and green voters, Labor voters. I mean, I take your point, Reid, that it's the politically activated who are watching it, but I still think it was worth doing.
Maybe it's one of the probably unanswerable questions that we could have put in our...
Well, if Albo wins this election, I was right.
David, as you know, as John F. Kennedy said, victory has 1,000 fathers and defeats an orphan. So I'm sure that there'll be a lot of people, if Albanese and Labor win this election, will be claiming it. And so just get in line, big fella.
Yeah.
Reid, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate your insights and doing a ton of research as well beforehand, more than we've ever done. So we really appreciate that as well. And good luck to all the good work that you keep on doing in the Social Democrat space.
Pleasure. Good to see you all.
Okay, let's get to our categories for this week. We've actually got a bunch to go through and actually got a question, and I'm going to start with the question first. So it's not actually a category one, but I'm actually interested in just giving some insight. It's from Kay, the Fifth Estate, reporting for duty, says, great pod, guys. Can I ask a question? Can you talk about the travelling party and what do they do? Which I think is a great question. And by that...
they work a couple of hours a day.
This is a good opportunity for some war stories about the travelling party, the 2013 federal campaign policy on the run at 35,000 feet.
Federal travelling parties are very different to state travelling parties to start with. Like the state travelling parties usually, certainly in a condensed state like Victoria, it's probably slightly harder in Queensland, but like the principle comes back to base to be reprogrammed. This is not how it works in a federal campaign, and the opposition leader or the leader of the party can make up all sorts of crazy ideas on the plane and just really feel like they're great and have no one around them reminding them of the research that happened last night that suggests we shouldn't be talking about that at all. And that's where you get a bit of distance between the two. But the primary role of the travelling party is that the leader is on a vehicle of some description, usually with the press gallery, but it is essentially, in all purposes, driving to the nightly news. It's a whole rigmarole to ensure that the TVs have something to put on that night from wherever the leader is. So I think Benita spoke last week about how expensive it is for different outlets to be on it, but it is a way for them to be shuffled around. There's a lot of organisation that goes into it, ensuring that they're all fed and they're all watered. Like there will be genuinely someone back at base watching the tweets from the journalists when they're getting a bit crabby and text the press sec, who will then go down with a bunch of cookies to make sure that the sugar levels are increased. It's essentially about making sure the nightly news has the best pictures and the best take on your policy announcement. One of the stories from a friend of mine who was on who was running the travelling party for Bill Shorten. The plane sort of broke down, so they had to move to a smaller one, and the decision had to be taken about who's on it. And to demonstrate what the purpose of the actual travelling party is. It was anyone with a microphone and anyone with a camera and one press sec, and then the opposition leader. Like, that was it. And that just demonstrates, I think, when you boil it down, what the point of the whole thing is. David?
I have nothing to add to that. That's exactly what it is. I mean, there is the kind of the advancing element where long-suffering political minds. Job. It's a terrible job. It's so important, though.
Yeah.
And they are unsung heroes, because if they succeed, you never hear from them, or they never hear anything. And if they fail, they become famous. And their job, of course, is to make sure that leaders don't stand under exit signs, and that they're not vox popping somebody who's, hated Albo since they were a child. So all of that detail has to go on in the background. But it is, to reinforce Jessie's point, quite a big logistical undertaking involving lots of people and resources and time, so that you can get onto the nightly news watched by fewer and fewer people.
Okay, let's do our categories. Thanks, Kate. That's a great question. I hope that clears it up for you. Tory with a typewriter. Do we have any nominations this week for Tory with a typewriter? Jessie?
Well, this Tory has a microphone, and Sherry Markson is having a bit of an episode on Sky News at the moment about how Newspoll is not accurate, because she's hearing from the Liberal Party that their polling is different. And it does...
different, like it was different for 2018 state campaign as well?
Yeah, different in that way, I think.
Good, that's good.
I think that if I was the Liberal Party, I'd be a bit worried about how different my internal polling was from the majority of polls. But she's not thrilled with this turn of events, and perhaps has started questioning why Newspoll have hired Redbridge and other things, and she's having a tiny little meltdown.
I saw her on Sky last night, just ripping into the Dutton campaign. So she's going through different stages of grief, Jessie, and I think you should respect that. and you might have seen one phase, but I saw the anger phase, where she was just lashing out at the Dutton campaign for failing to turn back the communist tide that is presently rushing over Australia.
And to some extent, like on that one, I will defend that. I find it frustrating that the Liberal Party in particular, there will be not a peep of criticism about the campaign until election night. Suddenly the polls are not going the way they thought. And suddenly the campaign which they introduced is very smart and very considered and very sharp becomes the worst campaign they've ever seen. And I appreciate she's at least started that conversation early.
Well, she's just typical of a long-standing challenge in our country, which is that the people best qualified to run Australia are all trapped in journalism, aren't they? My Tory with a typewriter is Benson from The Australian, who, a little like Jessie's story, he's going through a grief process too. And so he's in The Australian, obviously writing in anguished tones about the fact that the Liberal Party's campaign is falling flat, and their manifest destiny is being denied them by some small problems like no message, no detail, no work. So he's fun to read at the moment. And, I don't usually say that about him.
Any probably unanswerable questions for you both at this stage of the campaign?
My unanswerable question is Adam Bant and his team changing the ransom note as the campaign unfolds? They've obviously been preparing a ransom note for Labor based around their core campaign premise, which is that after the election they'll be able to get a meeting with Labor and ask for stuff. And I wonder if there is now a vague prospect of Labor governing in its own right or governing only with the support of Teals, and so not having to provide a contract with the Greens. I wonder if that means they're changing
I have
their message.
paid more attention to their socials after you've been talking about this, David, and they are posting some unhinged, unmitigated crap about the minority parliament of 2013, and my rage levels when I see it are just off the charts. But
you and I can go to the same therapy sessions.
The stench of desperation that I would agree is coming off that campaign right now about, but we really, 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 really want minority government is unhinged.
The people just want more voices. They've got a lovely list of word formulations. Greens do word formulations well. They will describe a pogrom as a meeting of the minds. They describe anarchy as more voices being heard. They do this really well.
They delivered the NDIS. I saw it on their social media, and I threw my phone across the room.
It was insulting. Do they know? They just know there's no limits to the shit.
But their campaign has toned down, and it's interesting.
Yes.
Australia is supporting genocide. That's gone. And I think their research must have told them that their sort of belligerent anti-Labor rhetoric was starting to jar with voters they were trying to win over.
I think
and they have really toned it down.
I think Wills in particular, like the amount of messaging about you don't have to vote for Labor to get rid of Dutton is just off the charts there. And I've seen that Wills have deployed Julia Gillard in the last week or so in a very clear message about that, which I think has been good and should be very popular there. I do think
vote Green to get Labor to act.
Yeah,
hello.
Just anyway, I think one of the unanswerable questions is how much the Teals are hurting the Greens. I think I expected to see far more of Sam Ratnam.
That's true.
Earned media during this campaign, and in good news for Peter, she's been.
We did
nowhere.
In 2016. She was more prominent than my opponent in 2016.
Absolutely,
in the daily media. For sure.
And she's hardly been anywhere. I've seen one ABC debate between the two of them, but Peter got the same amount of airtime. I am interested because part of the reason they put her there is because she had a megaphone as the leader of the Greens in the state parliament. So. She's kind of not been anywhere in an earned.
And it'd be
media
interesting to see what's happening in Brisbane. I mean, in the city of Brisbane, not just the seat of Brisbane. How the Greens got 3 seats there, each with their own challenges. This is a sliding doors election for the Greens. Are they going to get bigger or smaller?
Yeah, agree.
Another answer question comes from Jake. He's just asking the question about does personal vote have any kind of impact or no impact at all, and asking about is it more likely to be would you get a higher personal vote as a candidate or an incumbent in regional seats versus city seats? And it's an interesting question because it is a debate that we've often had in campaign world for those of us that, and David, you've been on both sides. You've been both a candidate /MP and a campaign director.
I was always very cynical and sceptical about personal votes. I always used to think that in metropolitan electorates, hardworking and diligent MPs might get their personal vote up to 1%. In regional seats, much higher because they are in regional media markets with regional TV and regional papers that can make them much bigger personalities in the public eye, whereas it's just less likely to make a difference in metro areas. There are, however, some exceptions that prove the rule. I would say, for instance, in his own seat, Albo has a very strong personal vote because he's very well known and he's been there forever and he grew up there, and that he's played politics in that community since he was a teenager. And I think that's true for Tanya Plibersek in her seat too. So I think there are exceptions to the rule, but generally speaking, zip, nada, doesn't matter. A good hardworking MP will obviously not be someone who can build up their own vote because it's just not possible, but they will build up the vote through their activities and their clever communication. So,
I would agree with that. I think that you can certainly build up the brand of the party really well. I think regional MPs, there is a difference. They do have their own earned media market, and it does feel like commitments they deliver are better understood in a regional context. I would also add to David's commentary, there is a lot of debate about it. Sometimes there is an easy way to work it out about whether there's a personal vote, and in some seats, it's comparing the Senate vote to the lower house vote and seeing if there's a significant difference. There is a standard difference between Labor's vote at the Senate and
which is about 5%, I think.
Yeah, so it's a question: is it 6? Is it 7? It sort of shows that they have built the Labor brand in a lower house perspective better. And polling, we had a candidate in 2014 where if you polled Labor's vote in that seat, it was 50-50. If you polled it with that candidate's name, it got up to 57.
And Jessie, was that metro or
seat.
Regional?
It was a peri-urban seat.
Okay.
It like to me, and it sort of sat with this candidate's sort of personality and how they performed. But it is possible. I agree with David. It is very rare.
I remember once saying to a candidate who was really talking up their personal vote that they thought they had at that would, be the difference. And I said, okay, fair enough. Well, what we'll do is we'll take the words Australian Labor Party off of your name on the ballot paper and see how you go. They were none too pleased with that suggestion. Anyway, speaking of which, any most reluctant door knocker awards this week? I don't think we have anyone. No one's shitting on each other from various campaigns. It's all quiet on the Western Front in regard to that.
Well, the question will be, we are now in pre-poll, so there'll be a lot of reluctant door knockers, and the fights that will be happening on local campaigns across the nation is where is the best place to spend your time.
Kooyong is getting a lot of attention on this front. The animus between the two campaigns, Liberal and Teal, is really striking, and they are now busily stealing each other's signs while denying it. Neither candidate is doing a good job of concealing their detestation of the other.
I agree.
Hottest take of the week? Do you have any hottest takes of the week?
My hottest take of the week is the coalition promising an extra $21 billion for defence, but not being able to tell us what that $21 billion buys.
Oh, God.
And not being able to tell us where it comes from. How to F up a big announcement in a big week.
Inarguably,
as a defence nerd, I was really looking forward to this. In my black heart, I thought maybe this will be something really good for a portfolio I care about. I'm a little bit disappointed, I'll be honest with you. I feel like I needed to pop in there and write this thing myself because they really stuffed this up.
Mel Meninga, In Over My Head Award. Do we have any nominations for that this week? I just thought the Bridget Archer interview on Sky that happened maybe in the last 24 hours where the journalist there was basically trying to say how much cheaper or how much is your nuclear policy going to cost? And they keep on giving this answer. I think Angus Taylor did it as well a couple of weeks ago. It's going to be 65% cheaper than Labor's, but they won't actually give them a figure. And even the Sky News journalist was like, I've had enough of this. Just give me a number. Just give me a number, Bridget. And she wouldn't do it. And it just...
There was a wonderful interview, I don't know if you saw it, between Claire O'Neill and the Liberal housing spokesperson, Suka, where it started to get, I think the audience might have shifted halfway through the debate and Suka started to pick up the sympathy-pity vote because he was just being belted across the studio. And Claire was in fine form. And eventually even Sarah Ferguson lost her patience with the Liberal spokesperson refusing to put numbers on anything and said, "What would your mother say?"
I saw that.
That was a funny moment.
I just on the Over My Head, there is a debate happening on Sky News at 3 p.m. Melbourne time on Wednesday the 23rd, so it will have happened when this goes out. The Menzies candidates are having a debate, and I am a bit worried about it, I'll be honest. I think that we have an excellent candidate there. I think he's very polished. He is very smart. I, as a campaign person, though, would be having absolute heart palpitations about this and what could possibly go wrong. So I don't think he's going to be in over his head, but it is certainly not something that I would have been keen on if I was in campaign headquarters.
I remember every election I had to do a debate with all the candidates at the Northcote Town Hall where the 6 or 7 or 8 of us would turn up and there'd just be a howling crowd of trots there hanging me in effigy the whole time. a wall of hate as every Green campaigner across the northern suburbs turned up to throw abuse at me. People used to wonder why I bothered doing it, but I thought it was resilience training.
I remember
if there had been a camera there, however, I'd have squibbed it. Like some of these local debates, you don't need.
No, you don't need to have it on. I remember you giving debate training to someone that was going to the Northcote Town Hall and saying, pull Daniels Andrews' body up and use it as a human shield. They are going to attack you, and you need something to hold on to.
Although I remember that particular debate and our candidate did a great job.
She did a phenomenal job.
Although it didn't win a vote and the crowd continued to hang her in effigy throughout. This is the thing about the non-Labor left. They do turn up to town hall debates.
Yeah, I'm sure, David, when you stood up there, you were like, hang on a minute. I thought my NUS National Conference days were behind me. Why?
It was worse than NUS. NUS, even on our worst day, we had a quarter of the vote.
Yeah, that's true. But good training, though. Good training.
Good training. Yeah.
Marginal C Hunger Games. Any nominations? I've got one, but does anyone else?
I'm out of this category.
Yeah. Well, Susan Genvy has sent in quite a she's actually got photos attached as well, so good on you, Susan. She proposes Cowper. Looks like the Nationals are trying to hold on to the furniture. A little proud on pre-poll, but probably not many know who he is. And would have been a lot better to let Barnaby Joyce leave the barracks. The Nationals started the day with a text drop, including a how to vote. And Susan goes on to say, I think we've had 3, maybe 4 letterbox drops. You can't watch YouTube without an ad, not to mention 3 pop-up offices and shopping centres across the electorate. So the Nationals is doing work for the first time. The Nationals' Pat Conahan is up against an independent, Kaz for Cowper, who was awash with oligarch money from Climate 200. Good on you, Susan, for getting stuck into the teals. Love that. Geez, it annoys me when Labor Party people like, my enemy's my friend. Stuff that, anyway.
The interference of big money in politics is terrible, except when it's banking the teals into
Absolutely. I'll look the other way, the age. Officers, letterbox deliveries, social media ads, core flutes. She has an army of volunteers and it's ahead in the polls. And I think she's still writing policy as we speak. At Labor, we comfort ourselves with the notion that she's forcing the Nationals to defend Cowper rather than spending money in the Hunter, which is a very good point. If she wins, it'll be the first time someone other than the Nationals have held the seat since the First World War. Labor came close in Kevin 07, but we couldn't get the Greens to preference us. There you go. Thank you, Susan.
I think a couple of interesting things that reminds me of. The first is that Cowper, Calare and Wannon are all smokies in this campaign. In all of those, long-standing Liberal incumbents face challenges from country independents. And as we Victorians know, those country independents can get deadly for Conservative incumbents. So that's 3 contests to keep an eye on. And your story today that you might have picked up is the Greens have reacted very negatively to the fact that Josh Burns in the old Melbourne Port seat, McNamara, has issued an open ticket. And the Greens are using that as an excuse to loathe on Labor and put a whole bunch of candidates ahead of us on their how to vote cards. I think, here's a personal guess. I have scrutinised ballots where the Greens preferenced independents ahead of Labor on their how to vote card, and 80% of Green voters went straight to Labor anyway. So I think this is a terrific opportunity to test that hypothesis in a whole bunch of seats. And if it is true that Green voters will preference Labor irrespective of the Green how to vote, then what Josh has done might actually prove to be a freeing of Labor and its preference options into the future, because their how to vote card doesn't count for as much as we imagine.
And I also think that they strategically don't hand out for us. So you make these deals about them putting you wherever, and they don't person the booths.
Yes, you'd struggle for their preferences in a seat like Aston.
Yeah.
And then a search party won't find a green from one end of the electorate to the other.
No, they're all yeah, I agree. I regionally, they do tend to hand out because they don't deploy to other places. But in those suburban seats, I personally don't think it's worth a lot.
I actually think someone from head office has done some research on that, David, to your hypothesis, and you are 100% on the money.
All right.
In this economy award, Jessie, I think you've got a nomination.
Yeah, Dutton announcing that he's going to bring back the Building Better Regions Fund, the pork barrelling fund that got Mackenzie in so much hot water in 2016 or wherever it was. So after everyone's sort of talking about, debt and how important it is to have a conservative campaign, and I think broadly Dutton has just not done that at all. But the Building Better Regions Fund, he's totally got away with it. He's announced this fund that they horrifically mismanaged and was basically corrupt, and he's announced it and no one's really talking about it. Anyway.
I saw a television spot where he talked about deregistering the CFMEU, and I thought, well, there's a lot of acronyms in that strange little advertisement.
Michaela Cash has been running that argument. Another person I've not seen much of during this campaign.
I mean, maybe it's a good message. Maybe you can grow it into something. I guess it just speaks to the fact that the Liberals have got too many undercooked messages in this campaign.
And they're just throwing anything at the wall and seeing what sticks. The Teal Temptation Trophy. We've got a nomination, but I think, Jesse, it's the same nomination that you've got. I'll read out the one from Jason. Andrew Hastie, a proposed future or potential future leader of the Liberal Party, whose branding he doesn't use on his slogan, putting you first. There's no Liberal Party branding on any of his materials. His T-shirts are Liberal blue, but it just has an Australian flag. Yeah, and Jason says clearly a happy broad church in Toryland.
Well, he got $21 billion in the announcement today, so he probably did better than other shadows in the shadow ERC, but he wasn't allowed to talk about what the $21 billion might get you.
Was he standing in front of a Liberal banner? Because I also noticed this stuff from Hastie, and I never thought I'd see the day that in WA someone was moving away from the Liberal brand. Hallelujah. Here we are. Big fan of it.
Who won the week? I think, Jessie, you can go first this week.
I think Labor by default is winning all the weeks unless the Libs do something. I think that that they need the step change. And they have not – they've completely flubbed their defence announcement, their security fund announcement was too little too late. I think Labor has done a phenomenal job on their women's policies this week, and I think it's been well targeted and they're hitting the right things. Like it turns out the National Secretary can take more days off Dimity because it's going well.
That's exactly right.
David?
Yeah, I agree. I think the third debate last night was a better performance from Dutton. And it was either a draw or perhaps some of the commentators have given it as a narrow win for Dutton. So maybe the Liberal campaign is moving from dreadful to merely terrible. But fundamentally, Jessie's right. This has been quite a schmozzle from the opposition. I mean, the Australian newspaper headline right now, Dutton clams up on what extra $21 billion in defence will buy. If you're a Liberal leader promising money in defence for the Australian newspaper, and that's the best headline you can get, then boy, oh boy, you're in trouble.
Thank you to everyone for sending in your nominations this week. We also got a Twitter comment from a one John McTiernan who says, loving the podcast team, now do an election special on the College of Cardinals. Pope Francis appointed 108 of the 135 cardinals who will select the next pontiff. Talk about branch stacking. So maybe we can turn our attention to that. A lot of shows coming out right now. I don't know if I've got any other time to.
You have done a rundown of the conclave. So if those of you that don't have time to put into watching the TV show, you can watch you and listen to you and Tess talk about it.
That is true. We did do an episode over the weekend for Easter. It's to celebrate Easter, actually. We didn't know.
It's suspicious timing.
We did not know the Holy Father was going to pass away. And when we recorded that episode, but we did talk about the film Conclave and how they dramatise the election of.
Well, the Holy Father had a meeting with J.D. Vance, and he couldn't hold out much longer after that.
I know,
and that's perfectly understandable.
I see Trump's going to the funeral as well. It just annoys me so much. Anyway. I also did note I looked at The Age this morning when I was quickly looking through just some stuff for today's show. The Age are doing an article about how Catholicism in Australia is in decline. Like, is that just not classic, secular, anti-Catholic? Just, the guy is barely in his coffin. There's 1.4 billion of us in mourning, which is a whole lot more than the people that read your shit rag, and you're just absolutely just taking a swing. Like you would not have done that for any other religion on this planet. Like, okay, so let's wrap this up. We've got a whole bunch of other episodes coming out. Obviously, this is today's one, dropped today, Friday. Next Monday, there is our monster Path to 76 episode where we're talking to people on the ground from every state and territory. We'll go through all the battleground seats, issues that are shaping those seats, and some basic predictions. So it's basically a kind of a form guide for you for election night. Plus, David, Jessie, and myself will do our final pre-election recap, which will drop next Wednesday or Thursday. Try to get it out as early as you possibly can. Then we're going to do a post-election analysis as well, and we're going to be doing a live show too.
And we're speaking to National Press Club after.
So much coming out from Socially Democratic. This is an election podcast, so we might as well lean in when we've got them. Otherwise, I can't keep on crapping about policy each week. I'll send myself to sleep. But the most important thing for you to do is you need to go knock on doors or make calls. Go to, this is labor.org. You can do that if you're in Victoria, or just go to alp.org.au. There's a thing that pops up at the front. Put your details in, and an organiser will give you a call. You can jump on a campaign. Knock doors, make calls. Don't go hand out on pre-poll. Wait, that's just there'll be 10,000 people they're handing out. There's no point doing that. Make some calls, knock some doors, talk to undecided voters, and win it for Labor. Thank you, Jessie, for your time today on the show.
No worries.
And thank you, David, for your time on the show. We'll see you next week.
Your pleasure.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Socially Democratic. Like the podcast? Hit the follow or subscribe button and be sure to leave a review on Apple Podcast or Podchaser, and get all the latest updates on Socially Democratic by following us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Blue Sky, and LinkedIn. See you next Friday.